Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of Rough 'em Up. Another edition of Rough 'em Up is in effect. The A-Train, Arlington Lane at your service. Joining me as always on the program. Hey, he's Mr. Roughneck himself, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't seen him on screen, if you haven't been to the Roughnecks games, he was fan of the week on week one, and he's my co-host. I'm glad to have him on board as always. Cullen Watkins. Cullen, great day, great Roughneck day to you, sir.
You know, it's always great to come into a new week coming off of a Roughnecks win. It's always been like that in our franchise history. Of course, 7-0 all time after picking up the win against the Arlington Renegades. Now, Arlington, I know you were at the game. I was at the game. We had a scare. There was a scare going into halftime, but we got the win. We got the win 23-14. There's so much we could talk about with this game. It was a roller coaster ride. I felt like I was at Six Flags, with the game. Where do we even start?
Let's see. Despite the fact that they did get the win, we got to touch a bit on that first half. The first half was probably the most scariest for the Roughnecks because on defense, got a chance to hear from Lawan Washington, who had not only forced 2 fumbles, but also got a receiving touchdown in that first half. And it definitely put the Roughnecks on their heels. Yes. And so, it was quite interesting for sure.
Those 2 fumbles, but I believe it was Will Likely, correct? He had both of the fumbles. It just felt like we couldn't hold on to the ball. We literally couldn't.
If 75-degree weather day, and we can hold on to the ball.
It was perfect conditions. It's not like we're playing in Las Vegas. It was great conditions, but the 23-14 score. If we didn't have those 2 fumbles, I think the game would have been a lot more lopsided, in my opinion. We'd have had a few more scores, but
I don't know, man. That Arlington team was pretty rough, and they definitely came with heat. They definitely came with a knack to try and shut down a bit of Brandon Silvers, get him some errant throws. Granted, he was 14 of 28, 173 and 2 touchdowns, no picks. So that, he was making smarter throws. There was some that wasn't so hot, but some of the throws that he was making were connecting, and was able to get 2 touchdowns out of it.
Yeah. And even going into this week 2 on our first episode of the Rough 'em Up podcast, going into week 2, we talked about, Brandon Silvers. I believe he threw 2 interceptions against the Guardians, and there's some pretty bad interceptions too. And that was sort of the big thing we said. He has to clean up those sort of bad interception level throws, and he did. So that's great improvement. And now, Arlington, you were at the press conference after the game. And I was able to tune in on it on Instagram a little bit. But what were your thoughts? I believe it was Nick Hawley, Coach Wade Phillips, and Brandon Silvers. What was the vibe that they gave off after the game?
Well, I would say this. Brandon was reserved, happy about the win, which is always great, but more reserved. I saw an exuberance from Nick Hawley, and Wade Phillips came in with energy, but he was more, just letting it be known of how, the game was, being perceived and how the energy was coming out. So he was exuberant himself too. So that was good seeing that nucleus together and, the energy that they brought to the table, one being reserved and another. So a nice little balanced mix after a win. And you said that's how we're going to, that's pretty much how we're going to be after wins, is exuberant. And then we got the balance, and then we got the reservedness. So, a mixture of both. And, it's excellent to see that this team is already on the winning side. And they got a big test coming up for them in week 3.
Yeah, about that, we'll we'll talk about the preview of the Week 3 matchup here in a bit. I'm nervous. I'm real nervous about it. But before we talk about that, let's talk about some more good stuff.
Yes.
So you were talking about Wade Phillips, and this is sort of one thing I noticed, and even going back and rewatching the game, going into halftime, Wade Phillips, he did not lose hope for the team at all. And that sort of, attitude, I think, carried over into the team. Even though they were down, they weren't put in a situation like this all season yet. They were down. But if you look at, the halftime footage, the team, they were confident. They were willing to play their own game. They were willing to get rid of those turnovers, and they knew they were going to win the game. And you compare that to what we saw in Orlando this week with Coach Buckley. It's two sides of the coin. I think the Wade Phillips experience was shown this past weekend. Even though we're down, we had the turnovers. It was a rough first half. That experience came through, and we won because of it. I'm a firm believer in that. We held Arlington scoreless in the first, and then the second half of the game, they didn't score. They did not score the entire rest of the game at their halftime. And I think that all goes to Coach Wade Phillips. All goes to Wade Phillips.
Yeah, no question about it, that one of the biggest things was making sure that the defense was taking care of business. And despite the fact that they gave up 2 touchdowns to from Drew Plitt and in the first half, they still were able to get to the quarterback, got 3 first half sacks, and only allowed 93 yards out of it. So, I mean, that is the main thing when it comes to this defense, is getting to the quarterback and able to put pressure on the quarterback and to deny the ball on those receivers. They were able to do that in the second half. Like you said, they didn't score.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a pleasantries, I should say, at this point. There's nothing but pleasantries in that second half.
It was a beautiful second half. And we picked up 2 interceptions. So I think that's 4 on the season now. I think we picked up 2 in week 1 against Orlando. So we're getting the sacks. We're getting the interceptions. I think us and DC right now, no doubt, have the best defense in the league. Now, I'm curious your thoughts on this, too, because you were talking about Brandon Silvers. Some of his throws were a little wide and stuff. He struggled a little bit. Cole McDonald, he had that one pass where he sort of overthrew his guy. It would have been a beautiful touchdown. But 7 carries for 39 yards. Are you liking this more running role that the Roughnecks are putting Cole McDonald into?
If I'm looking at, because I'm looking at other teams around the league, DC, when they played against Vegas, they were very deceptive. It's like with the Roughnecks, when you see Cole McDonald get into the game, it's not a deception.
You know what he's going to do.
Yeah, he's going to take off running. So if you're bringing in Cole McDonald into the game, I'm hoping that the coaching staff on the Roughnecks checks out the DC defenders and try to figure out some type of way to make that be utilized. But the difference is the defenders has 2 running quarterbacks, whereas the Roughnecks just has the only one with Cole McDonald. But still, you have to start utilizing the rushing attack. You need to get Max Borgi more involved. Even though he had a rushing touchdown in the fourth quarter, you still need to give him the ball more, because they're not expecting it. So, or even right now, since offensive line play is not the best, they're trying to figure out ways to make it utilized more in the air than they do on the ground. But you're going to have to use the ground game at some point during the season. So you can mix up both and have a balance. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that is portrayed as we get into week 3 and when their matchup against the Brahmas.
Yeah, and talking about Max Borgi and stuff, we have the talent for the running game. I love watching Max. That touchdown that he had, that was going to be a touchdown, whether it was in the end zone or on the 40-yard line. He's so much talent. He's just so much fun to watch. And talk about the receiving core too. Deontay Burnett didn't see what we saw week 1, but I believe in a earlier podcast, Arlington, you said that this team is definitely going to be spreading the wealth more, and we saw that this game. Ben Putman, who I actually watched back in the spring league, and I believe 2021, he was with the linemen at the time with Ryan Willis at quarterback. Arlington, I know St. Louis.
Yeah,
Ryan Willis, but so Ben Putman, week 1, he had 1 reception for 7 yards, but week 2, 4 receptions for 65 yards. But for Deontay Burnett, it was sort of a flip script. Week 1, he had 8 receptions for I believe 90 yards, and week 2, he only had 1 reception for 4 yards. So, what we're seeing, I'm liking it so far. This team is spreading the wealth. Whoever is open, just go for it. I feel like the 2020 team, Cam Phillips would have already had 6 touchdowns by now, but this team is spreading the wealth a lot more. What are you thinking about it?
When it comes to what Brandon Silvers is doing, I like it. What's funny is in the second half, he almost threw a red zone interception, but it was called back. It was a penalty against the Renegades. So a lot of people were sitting back thinking, I was like, all right, here we go again. We're getting the same old deal from last week from Brandon Silvers, but not so much. He did have some, like I said, real errant passes, but he's able to utilize different people. Ben Putman, Dante Kirkland, his name was said once again, Max Borgi, Cedric Bird. Those are guys that are able to, that he's able to find. And right now, he's taking what the defense is giving him. And so, like I said before, 14-28, $173, 2 touchdowns. Not a bad game because he didn't have any picks, but, it was okay. But I know when you get into this matchup against San Antonio, it's going to be it's going to be something. I wonder how A.J. Smith is going to open up that offense when it gets to going against the San Antonio defense.
Mm-hmm. And so now going into just week 3, let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's talk about week 3. The Brahmas, of course, coming off of a great game against the Orlando Guardians in Orlando. And they should have won week 1 too. Technically, I'm looking at this matchup. It's pretty much a 2-0 team against a 2-0 team.
You got to finish, though. You got to finish.
That's right. You have to finish. And, I think this is, I was telling it to you before we started recording, Arlington. Between 2020 and this year so far, I believe this San Antonio game next Sunday is going to be the hardest matchup that the Roughnecks have had to play between 2020 and 2023. I think the San Antonio team, I'm liking them. Jack Cohen, 3 touchdowns, 165 yards, no interceptions. He looked really good against Orlando, and he looked even solid. Again, he's a rookie, technically. In week 1 against the Battlehawks, that was his first professional game. So we can't really talk too much about that. But, Arlington, I want you to tell all the fans the wide receiver situation for San Antonio. They added a big name, Dan Williams.
Dan Williams, baby.
What are your thoughts?
If you remember seeing him with the Tampa Bay Vipers back in 2020, he was a valuable asset to that team. And if you bring it to a core such as with Alize Mack, because he led the way for San Antonio this past week with 48 yards and a touchdown and 4 receptions. I mean, look, now he has another weapon. And so it's going to be up to that secondary. And how Jack Cohn looks at Dan Williams, because I'm pretty sure these guys that they're going against, they're going to get an understanding of who Dan Williams is. So if they double him, you got to be ready for whoever else Jack Cohn is looking at. Because if Hines Ward knows what's good with him, you look at Dan Williams as option number one. Yep. Or better yet, you can look at Lise Mack as option one, Dan Williams number two to kind of throw off the defense. Mm-hmm. So Dan Williams is a great pickup. And yeah, it's going to be a battle, and I can't wait to see it.
And for those, just to put things in perspective, for those who don't, remember Dan Williams or haven't really heard about Dan Williams, there was only one other guy in 2020, the XFL in 2020, that beat him in receiving yards, and that's our guy, Cam Phillips. So that's pretty good. Cam Phillips was another level, but Dan Williams was right there, and he was with a rough Tampa Bay team too.
Yeah.
Jack Cohen is definitely a lot better than Taylor Cornelius was back in 2020. So I am really nervous about that. And two, I also wanted to talk about this. The San Antonio running game. Week 1, they ran the ball a lot more, and due to that, a lot better than they did in week 2. But week 2, we saw a better passing game. Arlington, what do you think we're going to see? Are we going to be seeing more passing, or are they going to go to that running game a bit more?
If they know what's good for them, they'll try to utilize the running game more, because you got to remember that the Roughnecks like to get to the quarterback. 5 sacks in the game this past week, and they did get an interception in the game. So they're going to be looking for Jack to make a mistake, something that, not normally what he was able to do on last week. Only had 8 incompletions. So they're going to be looking for the mistakes. And then it's going to be up to the front 7 to get to that quarterback, and they're able to do it. Our guy Trent Harris didn't get a sack on last week, but that's okay, because even though he still leads right now, he leads the league in sacks. 5 sacks from other guys, especially John Daka, who was able to get a strip sack. So there are other guys that can get to a quarterback, and that's what's going to be the case, especially for that offensive line. Of course, that's like I told you guys before, offensive line play is not going to be the best. However, it's going to improve as weeks progress. It's going to be interesting to see if there will be an improvement on both sides. So in this case, for the Roughnecks defense, is getting to the quarterback. If they can get to Jack Cohen, it's going to be a long day for the Brahmas.
And now on the Brahmas defense and the Houston offense, I know you said you want to see more of the running game, but how do you think those two are going to match up? I'm thinking, Orlando, given that they did have a few turnovers and stuff, they were still able to put up 14 points on the San Antonio defense. And that's Orlando we're talking about. They don't have a quarterback, in my opinion, and they're still able to put up some pretty good passing numbers. How do you think that's going to fare with now Houston going against San Antonio?
I look at it as it's going to be a dogfight, and anybody that's doing on the betting, you almost going to have to take the over in this matchup. Whatever that the line is staked as, you're going to have to take the over, because it may not start in the first half. Second half is when all the real good stuff started happening. And if offenses are clicking, points are going. We have a lot of points on the board.
And I hope we have a shootout, a Texas shootout.
I can't wait. I really cannot stress enough how much I'm waiting to see this game. Like, I'm getting more and more excited, and it's a couple days away, 3 days away. So that's the game I'm literally looking forward to seeing. Of course, there's going to be a battle of 2-0s happening too.
Over in D.C. But
I'm there in D.C. So I'm definitely going to check in with that one too. But it's still Texas teams going at it. And Texas, they take it serious.
These two teams could be the top teams in the South Division.
Yeah.
I think that right now, as it looks, I think they will more than likely. I think it will be definitely Arlington will be in the mix. But right now, San Antonio and Houston, in my opinion, are the best teams in the South Division. So it really is a battle of two heavyweights this early on in the season. Now, we may be looking back at this podcast week 7 or 8 and saying, what were we thinking? What were we thinking hyping up either of these teams? But as of right now, for those who are watching, this game, like Arlington said, you will not want to miss this. There's a lot riding on this game for multiple reasons, not only just for position in the standings, but also a lot of pride on the table for both of these teams. But look statistically and looking at the strengths of these teams, it should be pretty evenly matched. So before we end this, Arlington, what are your predictions? You don't even need to give a score prediction, but who do you think has the upper hand?
30 points, San Antonio got last week, but that was on Orlando. Mm-hmm. Interesting to see how they can do that on Houston defense. Houston scored, I think it was 23 points on the Arlington defense, right? It's going to be a battle between, like you said, it's going to be between the Houston defense and San Antonio offense, and how Houston offense can handle that San Antonio defense right now. Okay, and do the Silvers utilize the receiver core again, or is he going to try and start making one person the primary guy and start getting the ball to him? That's going to be the thing. I got Houston in a close one over San Antonio. It's going to be close.
Yeah, it is going to be close.
And I got Houston over San Antonio this week. I don't think Houston loses it at home, but let's keep things into perspective. Houston loss and an Arlington win gets a 3-way tie in the South.
Yeah, things will be pretty tight then. And they could more than likely Arlington has a very good chance of winning this week too, going against Orlando in Arlington. So Arlington more than likely, if they play their cards right, would pick up a win. But Arlington, I have the same sort of exact thoughts on it. I think it'll be a close matchup. I am nervous that Houston will pick up their first loss, but it'd be stupid to not pick the Roughnecks. I think it'd be stupid not to. They're look like one of the most complete teams in the league. They're at home. Based on what we've seen, again, like I said, they're one of the best teams in the league as of right now. So I think it would be stupid to go against them. And this isn't even the fan in me talking. Of course, the fan in me is going to say that we're going to go undefeated the whole season. But
right,
looking at it purely as an analysis view, I think it would be stupid to go against Houston. But like you said, it's going to be close, and I can't wait to be there to experience it.
Me either, because I'm thinking right now at this point, they won't get their first loss probably till I'll look at it now, because they got Orlando again, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Or excuse me, they have Orlando the following week. Yeah, they got them again. I said it right the first time. So I'm thinking at this point, they probably won't get their first loss to maybe week 5.
Who are they playing week 5?
Maybe week 5. Seattle. Seattle's going to be angry, okay? I'm telling you this now.
Yeah.
Seattle's going to be angry.
Yeah.
And
that's reasonable.
I'd rather them get it on the road than get it at home. Mm-hmm. Let them be undefeated at home, get their first loss on the road. So that way they get it. Everybody can get the rust, get the shakes and not be so – and then the pressure, the pressure of potentially, going undefeated, because that's a lot of pressure to be on every single game.
It is.
Every single game you gotta handle that. Hey, this could be our first loss, y'all. Could be. You're not thinking that, but you at the same time, it's in the back of your head.
It's there. It's there.
Oh, yeah. It's there. So it can potentially happen, but I don't think it's going to happen this week.
Well, again, this Sunday, I believe we're the last game of the XFL Week 3 schedule. San Antonio Brahmas versus the Houston Roughnecks. Should be a good game, but I believe that's all we have here. We are approaching that mark where we normally are. Arlington, do you have anything to say to anyone before we send it off here?
Hey, coming up, we're going to have some great guests coming on the show. And so I want you to tune in, and I can't wait. Make sure you follow me at the A-Train Show. Make sure you follow XFan Legion on Twitter too. Make sure you follow this show on YouTube.
Oh, for sure. Make sure, it'll be in the description. We have all the Twitters. We recently made a Twitter for this podcast, so we'll be on that too. But make sure you subscribe because we're going to be every single week covering the Houston Roughnecks. We are the #1 spot for everything Houston Roughnecks on YouTube. My name is Cullen Watkins, and I'm here with A-Train himself. We will see y'all next week. And remember, rough them up, baby. Let's do it.
That's right. Go Roughnecks.